We should never allow the government to decide what is acceptable speech and what is unacceptable speech. We should penalize behaviors, not opinions, and not speech. If you start trying to regulate speech, you start trying to regulate thoughts, you start trying to regulate beliefs rather than behaviors, there's no way that you're not going to abridge the constitutional rights of millions of Americans.
At home, the madman had a name, Billy Firey, Jr.
We had a young white male that got some gasoline at the service station directly in front of the Winn-Dixie, walked over from that point over here, just doused it in there and threw a lighter in there, and it went up like a bomb.
And he feels that it's a national-wide conspiracy.
He would have to be crazy.
He's not crazy.
I think that he is acting.
I think he's a mean, nasty man.
People had to die for them to actually see what...
3rd, 1983, at 10:43. My daughter, Leanne Carter, was killed in the Winn-Dixie store at 8 o'clock last night, July the 2nd, 1983. As of this time, we have had no word, a letter, telegram, card, phone call, or personal contact from anyone with Winn-Dixie. I and my son arrived at the store where the fire occurred at approximately 9:30 last night, July the 2nd, 1983. I made an inquiry with Mr. Davis and the security man from Winn-Dixie as to where my daughter, Leanne Carter, was. Their response was a nodding of the head in a negative manner. I directed a question directly to the gentleman, and I said, "What is your name?" He said, "My name is Mr. Davis." I directed a question to the other gentleman, and he indicated that he was the security man from Winn-Dixie. I directed a question to them directly into their face. "Where is my daughter, Leanne Carter?" Their reply was, "You'll have to see the detectives." I walked over and asked the detective if he could tell me where my daughter, Leanne Carter, was. He says, "How do you spell her name?" I spelled her name. He said, "What is your phone number?" I gave him my phone number. It's 681-4253. He then stated that some had been sent to Brandon Community, others to Tampa General, some to St. Joe, some to University Hospital. I left and went to Brandon Community Hospital emergency room and made a request there. If they had my daughter, Leanne Carter, their response was negative. I then returned home, picked up my wife, and we immediately went down to Tampa General Hospital, arriving there at approximately 9:45. We went into the emergency room, was approached by one of the workers there, directed a question to a social worker as to if she had any information on Leanne Carter, my daughter. Her response was, "No, I do not." She indicated that she would go back and check with the sheriff's office detective, the officer there at the emergency room. She returned approximately 10, 15 to 20 minutes later, said she had no word. She was unable or did not tell us if my daughter, Leanne Carter, was in fact at Tampa General or in fact at any of the other hospitals. She indicated that she would go back and further check for us. She returned approximately 15 to 20 minutes later, again with a negative response, that she had been unable to reach the detective or the sheriff's officer out at the scene of the fire. She left, again returned approximately 20 minutes to half an hour, indicated that they were awaiting the word from the coroner's office, the medical examiner. She left, approximately 20 minutes to half an hour. She returned again and told us that a detective from the scene was on the way to the emergency room to see us, to talk to us. My wife and I went outside at the driveway, waited until a detective with the badge on his pocket came in. I asked him if he had just come from the Winn-Dixie store. He said yes. I said, "Are you looking for the Carters?" He said yes. I said, "We are the Carters. Where is our daughter?" He said, "I cannot tell you. You'll have to go inside." We accompanied him inside and went to a private office whereby he requested what my daughter, Leanne Carter, was wearing. We told him that she was wearing, of course, her Winn-Dixie uniform, her class ring from M.D. Collins High School, and a birthstone ring. At this point, we said, or asked him if our daughter was dead, and he says, "Yes, she is." This was at approximately 10 minutes after 1. We had been there since approximately 9:45. No one would tell us anything. Rita came by this evening, July the 3rd, 1983, at approximately 10 o'clock, along with Sean. Rita was working the cash register next to Lee at the Palm River store on the night of July the 2nd, 1983. She indicated to me when I questioned her that she had gone to the customer service desk to look up a check cashing card, but that when she looked up, that a man had opened the door, threw a fuel can in, then threw a lighted object which ignited the fuel engulfing all of the check-in areas. The computers which the cash registers, the checkout agents, the cashiers used, being electric, they themselves exploded. She was approached at a later time after she had been taken from the store. She was taken to an emergency vehicle after inquiring as to how my daughter Leanne Carter was. A person from the produce department or one of the other departments in the store was either with her and assisted her to the emergency equipment or met her there, and at that time told her that Leanne was dead. I was there at approximately 9:30, and Rita indicated that it was very soon after this time when I had made an inquiry with her if she knew where Lee was.
Firebombed the Winn-Dixie store on Palm River Road and 78th Street tonight. We have two reports, beginning with Pulse 13's Warren Ellie, who is at the scene of the explosion. Warren?
Yes, Suzanne, it happened just before 8 o'clock here at the Winn-Dixie store. It was controlled pandemonium. A man walked into the store, apparently with a gasoline can, spread the gasoline across the front of the Winn-Dixie store, threw a match, and ran outside. At this time, we now know there is one confirmed dead, another of the 16 injured here tonight.
The worst cases were rushed to Tampa General Hospital. 6 victims, mainly bag boys and checkout clerks. At least one so badly burned she was not expected to survive. Phyllis Pujo's 16-year-old son had been out of town all week taking tests for college.
They just called me home. They told me my son was gone.
Minutes later, Pujo's worst fears were realized. His son, unconscious and in shock, arrived at Tampa General. His back was covered with third-degree burns.
When sheriff's deputies arrested John William Firey in East Hillsborough County, they say he offered little resistance except to spit on arresting officers.
The only concern the state attorney's office has is that Mr. Firey not be allowed to manipulate the system to avoid a trial.
Can you find a man not guilty by reason of insanity even after he admits committing the act?
Yes, I could say that, but within my heart, I know he's guilty.
The temperatures at the center of a gasoline fireball reach 2,000 degrees hot. Fortunately for 20-year-old Lee Carter, a Winn-Dixie cashier, the life expectancy of a person in the midst of that Holocaust was but an agonizing moment.
The act itself is insane because it's the act of a madman.
I was down on my knees, and the first thing I saw was a baby walk out of the fire that was still on fire. Clothes had been burned off. You couldn't really tell if it was a boy or a girl.
And I saw a man kneeling down, getting ready to blow the place.
Well, at the time, we didn't know who was a victim. It was just seemed to be a clump laying between the registers.
Firebomb Winn-Dixie?
Like I said, I cracked up. I couldn't take it no more.
There's no rational way you can explain the crime because it's an irrational crime. The guy's crazy. One thing he is not. He is not a fool. Don't let him fool you.
We, the jury, find as follows. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree.
I think Billy right now thinks he's being beamed up to the planet Uranus.
I know I look like a pretty cruel guy, but this is war, and war is hell.
A majority of the jury, by a vote of 7 to 5, advise and recommend to the court as to each count that it impose a sentence of life imprisonment.
We felt that the death penalty was fully justified in this case.
I just want to go to my car. I want to burn each hand. Let it go out. And I want to burn them until his skin falls off his
that they feel, and I know why they feel that way, but I am a person with fairly strong convictions, and I believe what I did was the right thing.
You fix all, Billy? Take a deep breath. What should Billy Firey's sentence be?
Years later, the horror lives in these images of a packed supermarket splashed with gas. 5 people, mothers, daughters, as young as 4, all burned alive in an act of terrorism long before September 11th made that threat a part of everyday life in America. Doctors said Billy Firey was a deranged drifter who thought he was attacking a Russian military base.
They castrated my wife and my 4-year-old son 3 years ago, buddy, and I crucified Hillsborough County with radioactive asbestos.
It was public defender Craig Aldridge's first death penalty case. Looking back, he says, Firey should have never been on the street.
Everybody knew that there was a mentally deranged person on the streets of Tampa. And the bottom line is the system failed them. The family begged to do something to help him, and they never helped.
Firey even spray-painted a warning in the neighborhood only days before the firebomb. I interviewed Firey's sister Rhonda that night.
And all we ever got out of him was, well, how do you know he's crazy? Who are you to say that he's crazy?
After a year in a state hospital, Firey was brought back. The funerals may have been over, but the mourning had turned to anger as the trial began.
I swear you could feel the hostility. It was like heat from a pot-bellied stove. You could feel it.
Also in court, the families of the victims. The Carters lost their 20-year-old daughter, Leanne. She'd dreamed of being a school teacher, of having a family of her own. Her father and brother live now near Atlanta. They say they want Leanne's memory kept alive.
I know a lot of the families didn't want to talk about it this year, but we don't want people to forget about it.
The Carters say they'll never accept the state Supreme Court's decision to commute Firey's death sentences to life without parole.
I want him dead. I want him to be dead from that very night that it happened, because he took my daughter away from me.
It's little solace to the Carters that police 20 years later are better trained to deal with the Billy Fireys amongst us. Warren Ellie, Fox 13 News.
As you can well imagine, this is the day the families of the 5 victims have been waiting a year for.
And we have with us live tonight Mr. and Mrs. Jean Carter. They are the parents of Lee Carter, a Winn-Dixie cashier killed that day a year ago. Mr. and Mrs. Carter and the rest of your family, we thank you for being with us tonight. Could you tell us what your reaction to today's decision was?
We are delighted that the trial, the court, and the judge has now found and ruled that this person is now competent to stand trial.
Could you describe, sir, your feelings about this man?
Our feelings are, sir, that we would certainly want that a speedy trial be held, and that our own personal feelings is, of course, that he be found guilty and that he be sent up and sentenced to die in the electric chair.
A year has passed now, sir, since the incident occurred, and it's given your family hopefully an opportunity to recover somewhat. Are you at all concerned that when the trial begins that you'll have to relive it all over again?
Sir, we have been reliving this the entire year, and we will continue to relive this our entire lifetime. It will never diminish our feelings and our love for our daughter.
Well, Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, from all of us here at Newswatch 8, we thank you for being with us, and we hope that you have strength to get through all of this. I know it's been an awful experience for you.
Yes,
good luck to all of you.
Thank you so much, sir, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Well, on to other things. Convicted Firey is charged with the deaths of 5 people after he allegedly poured gas on them and ignited it. Shoppers watched in horror. Firey's been in a state hospital. Firey apparently tried to kill himself in his cell. Major John Cacciatore told Newswatch 8's Steve Nichols what happened.
He apparently wrapped a sheet around the bars and the door, wrapped the sheet about shoulder high, wrapped it around his neck, and then sat down.
Cacciatore says Firey did not injure himself and was conscious when he was found by a deputy jailer. In July, Firey was found competent to stand trial in the 1983 firebombing deaths of 5 people at a Claremelle City supermarket.
The day a man named Billy Firey walked into the Claremelle Winn-Dixie, throwing gasoline and igniting it. Fox 13's Tanya Arja talked to one of the survivors.
The flashbacks quickly come to Ellis Pujols, standing in the old parking lot, looking at the same building, remembering 25 years ago. He was a 16-year-old bag boy working at Winn-Dixie, working with a cashier named Leanne Carter.
We were getting ready to bag for the first customer when suddenly got splashed. She got splashed in the face, I got splashed in the back.
The smell told him right away it was gasoline.
And I turned around to take a look, and I saw Billy. And Billy was getting ready to kneel down with a light blue Bic lighter, silver tip, getting ready to pretty much light up the place.
Smoke and flames filled the front of the store.
Once the thing started going up, I went up with it.
He suffered burns on his back and legs, still has scars as a constant memory. But 5 people didn't survive, including Leanne, the cashier. Billy Firey was arrested the next day. His family says they tried for years to get him help. He wrote an eerie message, "Billy can't handle it. See? Fire," on a wall near the Winn-Dixie days before.
He had enough thought process in his mind to get it done. All right, am I upset about that? Yes. But do I forgive him? Yes.
Leanne's father was devastated right until the day he died in 2005.
I want him dead. I want him dead from that very night that it happened, because he took my daughter away from me.
Ellis went back to work at that Winn-Dixie 2 months after the fire, not wanting to let Billy Firey win.
Some of the tiles up on the ceiling still had some of the residue. You know, you could tell that it was a little burnt. It was a little uncomfortable the first couple days.
He's now married with 2 kids. Billy Firey is 55 years old, serving 5 life sentences. Ellis will never forget that day, the pain he saw and heard. Tanya Arja, Fox 13.
On trial April 29th, Firey was found competent to stand trial this afternoon after 3 mental health doctors examined him. Newswatch 8's Chuck Delaney is here with more on the story. Chuck, what did the doctors find?
Well, according to reports, the doctors found a Billy Firey who knew from right and wrong, and they found a Billy Firey who understands the charges against him. But the results of the reports may have surprised Firey's defense attorneys.
Your Honor, the defendant waives his right to this hearing.
Bruce Curry, Billy Firey's attorney, attempted to cancel the competency hearing. With insanity as a possible defense, reports claiming Firey is sane may harm the planned defense.
The report does indicate that he is competent to stand trial.
The judge read from the 3 reports, which are all similar. The first report back from Dr. Arturo Gonzalez. Firey is competent to stand trial. The report back from Dr. Gerald Mussenden. Firey is competent to stand trial. And the report back from Dr. Robert Koffer. Firey is competent to stand trial. Billy Firey's attorney tried to cancel the hearing to keep the reports off the court records, but the judge refused. And according to the state attorney, the refusal means this case finally goes to trial.
The state of Florida will be ready to go to trial on April 29th.
The victims of the crime are relieved by today's action. Gene Carter's daughter, Lee Carter, was killed by fire that night. He calls Firey's court actions delay tactics.
The man is just putting on a charade, just doing everything he can, knowing well and good that beyond the shadow of a doubt, he's guilty of committing these crimes.
If there are no delays, Billy Firey is scheduled to stand trial on April 29th. We say scheduled because there's a pre-trial conference set for next Monday, and more delays, Bill, may come out of that.
Chuck, is there any chance the trial will be moved out of the area?
They're going to try to see the jury on April 29th when they start. If they can't, they're going to take it.
Thank you.
My reports tonight, doctors at the state mental hospital where Billy Firey has been confined now say their patient is competent.
It was just over a year ago that someone walked into this grocery store, splashed gasoline over the checkout area, and threw a match. The Inferno killed 5 people and injured 13 others. Police charged this man, Billy Firey, with the firebombing, but a judge ruled he was incompetent to stand trial and sent him here to the state mental hospital in Chattahoochee for evaluation and treatment. Now, almost a year later, the man in charge of that evaluation, Stuart Parsons, says Billy Firey is competent. But the hospital report isn't the final word. When Firey's returned to Tampa next month, he'll be examined by court-appointed doctors. A judge will then rule whether Billy Firey is lucid enough to be tried for murder.
If Firey is found competent to stand trial, as we hope he will be, then of course a trial date will be set, and we will proceed to trial on the 5 first-degree murder charges as well as the arson charge. If by some chance he is ruled to be incompetent, he will be returned to Chattahoochee until he is competent to stand trial.
Firey's mother, Elizabeth, lives here. She's said to be his only regular visitor. The family refused to talk with us today, but Elizabeth Firey recently told a newspaper reporter Billy sometimes looks and acts competent. Gene Carter's daughter, Lee, died in the blast. He never believed Billy Firey was too sick to stand trial, and now hopes a year of frustration and anger will be resolved in court.
We hope that the judicial system will move rapidly now, and that he will be brought, Firey be brought before the criminal justice. A trial will be held, and our hopes are that he will be found guilty and sentenced to die in the electric chair.
Firey's scheduled to be returned to Tampa August 10th. If he's ruled competent, he faces 5 first-degree murder charges. Diane.
If I were in your shoes, what would be going through my mind as you watch this very tedious and drawn-out proceeding going on?
The thoughts that are going through my mind, one is that we, the general, will get select a jury, 14 people to try for the trial. Number 2 is that a verdict will be reached, finding Firey guilty as charged. Then the third thing would be to find him or confine him up there to be electrocuted. When this is accomplished, then that's step 1, 2, 3. We are in step 1 now. At least we are to trial. Number 2 is to get him convicted send us to the electric chair. Then the third step, of course, is to carry that out.
I know that the families have had, I know you've been sitting with some. What's the feeling? What's the mood among y'all?
I have only talked to really one of the families. Their feeling is exactly as similar to ours.
As you sit there and you watch Billy Firey in that courtroom, it's almost difficult to believe that he isn't somehow wrong, insane, whatever. I mean, you're watching him. What are you seeing? What are you interpreting?
I do not interpret that. My feeling is that this was planned, premeditated, and carried out. The information I have from the Sheriff's Department is that he was in there the weekend prior to that, made a threat that he was coming back to throw gasoline on a cashier and set her on fire. The following weekend, the only weekend that my daughter was over there, he did exactly what he said. And it was on my daughter. Bless her heart.
There will come down a moment where these people will have to decide whether he's to live or die.
Right.
As it seems to come out, it's going to be a difficult decision. I know it would be an easy one for anyone in your shoes, but what about those people?
I'm sure it's going to be difficult. I have a broad mind in respect to this. I feel it's just most unfortunate. Of course, the judicial system won't allow it, but that someone could be over there that has experienced what we have. Because believe me, my brother, no one knows. No one in the world knows how he feels.
Let's talk to David in Brandon. Hello, David.
Hello.
What you got?
I got a question about the judicial system.
Yeah?
Okay, my sister Leanne died in that firebombing in Winn-Dixie,
Oh,
Clear
boy.
Mill.
I'm sorry.
And, well, anyway, it happened 3 years ago, and my family and I are really wanting Firey and the electric chair, and apparently all these appeals coming up and everything is going to really put that to the, to the floor. So what I'm asking is, how long do these appeals usually last, and, how many years do these, how many do they have available to them?
Well, to answer your question, tragically, they're going to last for you for what will seem to be an eternity because of the emotions involved. They may appeal to the 2nd District Court of Appeals. If error is found, it can be sent back for retrial. If he's convicted again, they can try to find error and appeal again. If they can't find it through there, they can go all the way to the Supreme Court of the state of Florida several times. If they find a federal issue, they can exhaust these remedies. They can step over into your federal court system. Or could go as far as the Supreme Court of the United States. You must stop and look at some of the men who are presently on death row in this state. Some have been there a long, long time, a number of years.
10 years or more.
10 years or more. I cannot say to you that the judicial system is defective in this. I cannot say to you that it's serving you as best it could, because the interest of both parties exist. As much as you feel opposed to Mr. Firey, he too has some rights. Now, that's a horrible thing to say to the sister or brother of a victim of that bombing. But the system is set up with a series of checks and balances and safeguards, and unfortunately there are times when we're interested in the fatal outcome to the perpetrator of such an act, such as you would be, that looking at these procedures could be a horrendous situation and it could be frustrating. I can only answer this to you. As an attorney, I can look at both ends of it and I can say, I feel for you, I sympathize with you, I feel for the law and support the law. In regard of this thing could be years or it could be quick. I cannot predict it.
I'm going to give you my opinion now. Okay, David? All right. You understand this is my opinion?
Yeah, I understand.
All right, my personal opinion. My personal opinion is that unless the American public starts to react and lets the judges know that we're fed up, okay?
Right.
Unless the American public, and I'm talking letters to the editor, I'm talking letters to the judges themselves, I'm talking letters to lawmakers, until the victims get together and get their victims' rights organizations to lobby. When David in Brandon calls this radio show and talks in a very civil manner like you're talking, you make your point. And I think you must continue to make the point you're making. You see, you have my sympathy. I did a number of radio shows about the death penalty. I have published pamphlets. And if you want to send me, don't give me your address now, but if you want to send me a short letter to the radio station, I'll send you some. And you have my sympathy. But unfortunately, until we judge the judges, you're going to have a situation where these nightmares continue. In my opinion, there should be a 3 to 5 year period after the initial, and this is my opinion, after the initial trial, there should be a prescribed time for all of the appeals to be exhausted, and then there should be the sentence. And I understand how you feel. And I've got to tell you, I had a friend of mine who was very much against the death penalty until his brother was killed. And he went from a liberal to a conservative in about 2 heartbeats. So you have my sympathy, but you're going to have to continue along with all other victims to make yourself known and judge the judges.
Yeah, that's true.
David,
and you're doing that.
David, what you and so many others like you must do is touch those in society who have never suffered what you have suffered, have not felt what you have felt. And in doing so, remember that the system of safeguards exists for all people, but there is a limit. And it's people like you who will move the conscience of other people. So don't stop here.
Okay?
That's true. You know,
David, stay in touch with us.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
And listen, write a letter. Write a letter to the editor. And if I were you, I would do this, David. Be a crank, okay? Go down to the local I'll tell you what, if you'll contact me by letter at the radio station, okay?
Okay.
By letter. And the address is 801 East Jackson.
Okay.
Tampa 33602. And my last name is Harder, Harder. Please put personal on the envelope because we're getting letters for other things, requests of this and that. Put personal on it.
Okay.
And I will send you a list of all of the newspapers in the state of Florida that you can write to. Okay?
Okay.
All right?
Well, thank you very much
I'll
for
do
your
what
time.
I can to help. Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you called. Stay in touch. You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I made this.
Peculiar thing about this.
You didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. You didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen.
bring all of this to every story that breaks.
We've got breaking news, and it's good news.
And touches your heart.
How do you even say thank you? Thank you is not big enough.
I made this.
The images shocked the world. Relentless bombings. Stunned survivors.
I'm very